Hey everybody, welcome back to Help Solve the Case, and this is our review of Broken Plea by Christopher Whitcomb. What the heck is going on in the Kohberger case? All kinds of things apparently that we didn't know about, we can't make sense of, and we don't know what to do with. Okay? We are currently in Chapter 10. We talked about why he did it, and we're trying to understand that more. We're getting into victimology, and here, apparently, according to Chris Whitcomb, Idaho State Police had their own victimology unit, right? Which is kind of interesting. And we're going to see what investigators felt. We assume we're going to see what investigators felt could have come from the victims that could have potentially innocently targeted them. Okay? We never know what gets into somebody's mind as to why they did something. We don't know, but I will tell you, I'll try to remember to link to it. I did a video specific between, I think it was video 19. Right after that, I did a video specifically about what I feel was part of the motivation, the familiarity Brian Kohberger had with these gals, these folks that were the victims, unfortunately. So I would love if you would check that out, see what you think. Does it make sense to you? Because from what I've heard, they don't have anything here in the victimology. Like, it doesn't make sense to them, right? And this is also what Whitcomb is saying. Like, the evidence doesn't make sense. The person doesn't make sense. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And as a cop for many years, like Whitcomb was, agent for the FBI, yeah, we get some, we go, oh, aha, okay, yep, okay. And like I say, watch my eyebrows. Like, I've never seen anything like this case. So we'll see. So let's get into what he's talking about, victimology, right? So he says that victimology is taught in academies, police academies. I wasn't taught that. And accepted as a valid way to gain context. And I think we probably might have just been doing it in the back of our minds. We just didn't have a formal thing for it. He says lab techs focus on forensics. Detectives hit the streets. Not so much anymore these days, boys. Seeking perspective from friends and family about the victims. Things like drug use, romantic interactions, day-to-day routines. Much of what they discover is based on opinion, but none of it will show up in court, so the rules barely matter. This is according to him. He said it's about context, about painting the larger picture. So he continues here talking about victimology allows investigators to flesh out the facts of their case based on what people think or feel. It's what Turvey, remember Dr. Turvey, referred to as coarse graining, which is like a coarse grain brush. That's the thing they talk about it. So a coarse grain, because it is a type of brush. And here he goes using his broad brush look at the totality of the circumstances. An overview cops can start with to dig down as things become clearer. And he says, this is Whitcomb, we see the concept plainly here in two brief reports. The first filed January 9th, 2023, so that's some months later, and a month after Kohberger was arrested. So it says on November 16th, 2022, ISP Detective Joe Lake was assigned by ISP Detective Sergeant Darren Gilbertson to lead the victimology team for the November 13, 2022 Moscow, Lada County, Idaho quadruple murder investigation. So it's kind of the same thing that we talk about in unknown human remains cases, right? There's a lot of scuttlebutt. I am adamant that every unidentified human remains case, which is essentially a body or some bones, it was somebody, when they get recovered too many times, I feel they're treated as just what we call a UHR case. And no, they have to be treated like a homicide too, until we know differently from the medical examiner, if possible, That's a whole nother story there. But we also have to get them ID'd, because the victimology is important too. Who they were, who was around them, whatever. So if we don't have some immediately apparent form of mechanism of injury to know what happened to this person, and there's nothing around it, especially in the UHR. I was just recording some cases, right, from Sedona. If there's nothing around but bones, what are you going to do? There's not much you can do. But I believe you do need to treat it as a homicide. And then once, shocking, you find out who the person is, it makes a lot more sense, right? And then, thank God, if you've preserved it as a homicide, you can treat it that way and start looking at possible suspects once you know who the victims are. So same thing here. But they formed a victimology team after Kohberger got arrested. It sounds like not before. And that's interesting, because victimology can lead you to the suspect. I don't think the suspect leads you to the victims, but I'm open to being proven wrong. Okay. So let's see what else Whitcomb says here. Okay. All right. Here he says, police started building character sketches of their victims within days of the crimes. They tried to narrow their search for suspect based on MO and Dylan's physical description of a white male with average height and weight. Because the first two murders occurred in Maddie's room, they looked at her current boyfriend, then to gossip involving a drunken tryst with a Delta Tau member named Connor Chestnut. Neither Schreiger or Chestnut has ever been implicated or charged. But yes, once you find out who the victim is, who the person is, you want to start looking at the people closest to them, because it's typically that. And we also looked at, what this report that I did. It's the FBI said only 9.9%, I believe it was, are stranger list crimes. Okay. So they tracked Maddie's movement to the corner club. They talked to people, staff. They looked at the camera footage. I think we saw that pretty early on. The grub truck guy wearing a hoodie, one of Kaylee's former boyfriends, a man she might have invited home from a bar, a Winco stalker, oh my goodness, a student from Boise who abruptly left campus with an unexplained gash on his hand, and he drove a white sedan that looked very much like the one they saw on the ring cam video. Hearsay, he says. Yes, acceptable in victimology. Absolutely. So the victimology part is not part of the case, is kind of what he's saying. So he says they also looked at alcohol dependence, drug dealing, social media profiles on dating sites like Tinder, commercial sex platforms like OnlyFans. There was a persistent rumor that one or more of the victims had earned money posing online in a bikini or selling photos of their feet. Called a fetish, FYI. Not the first time I've heard some stuff like that. Bethany was asked about this in the presence of her lawyer and admitted that it might have been a thing at 1122, but she was not involved. Okay. As with so many aspects of the investigation, hopeful leads proved fruitless. This is Whitcomb saying this. Persons of interest became possible suspects. Possible suspects became the focus of intense scrutiny. But in the end, we were all washed out with no credible... We're all washed out with no credible ties to the crime. He says, eventually the personal lives of the victims began to emerge, and the world of 1122 King Road started to make sense. But it took a lot of effort from a who's who of agencies. Now, he brings stuff up for a reason. He's going somewhere. We just don't know it yet. So this is a report from Joe Lake from Idaho State Police. So he says, the victimology team consisted of me, which would be Lake, FBI Special Agent Jonathan Riggs, FBI Special Agent Jared Thompson, FBI tactical specialist Carrie Hadaway, and statewide ISP detectives and nationwide FBI agents for out-of-area interviews. And he says, which is true, for those wondering about jurisdiction, murder is typically not a federal crime. The FBI can offer resources under the purview of police cooperation, however, and due to the widespread notoriety of this case, the Bureau jumped right in. Ask me about the FBI taking over on your cases. My bank robbery, when I caught the suspects, for example. Yes. Whose badge is bigger? Okay. I let me go back to, I digress. Okay. But that's an interesting statement there, right? Due to the widespread notoriety of the case, the Bureau jumps right in. It's an interesting choice of words, right? Senior management ran things from headquarters in D.C., but the Office of Origin was designated the Salt Lake City Division. Agents Thompson and Riggs commuted from an outpost known as the Lewiston Resident Agency, and he lists the case number there for whatever reason. So I guess like put in his report, he's talking about they're trying to understand the relationships, the social groups, the things, and the connections to any potential suspect. So this is Lake reporting that on January 3rd, Idaho State Police Detective Sergeant Gilbertson assigned him the additional investigative duty of coordinating the priority of investigation tips related to suspect Brian C. Kohberger. The coordination of tips includes prioritizing interviews of people associated to Kohberger. Now, we have to go back to our tip. Our tip, which came in from the FBI on December 19th, I believe it was. Now, let me pull this up here. Okay, so he says here, at first glance, it might seem surprising that law enforcement would focus such broad, multi-agency attention to the day-to-day interactions of people in the house. Yeah, like you're thinking they should be out catching the suspect, right? But he also says, which is true, which we're seeing in the Nancy Guthrie case, that crimes like this can overwhelm a small community with limited resources. In Moscow, in 2022, Moscow had a population of 26,249. We've already looked at the police department, and I think they had a good number of officers based on the population, I think. He says, according to statistics, they reported 0 homicides in 2021 and 0 in 2023. The only homicides in 2022 were those of the 4 victims in the case. He says they reached out, Moscow PD reached out almost immediately to other specialized units for support. The ISP Crime Lab had responded with their evidence analysis team. The FBI added significant specialization through CODIS and Critical Incident Response Group, a cross-country surveillance element known as Special Operations Group, and the Cellular Analysis Survey Team, CAST. Moscow police were offered, but did not accept help from the FBI's National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime, or profilers, from its famous Behavioral Analysis Unit. That's interesting. That's really interesting. And you know, he put stuff in there for a reason. That is surprising to me. Like, I don't mean to be lagging here and giving you zero air, whatever. But that is why? Why? Were they focusing in on somebody else? Like, why? It's very interesting. I don't understand that. Okay. Good point. You know, he's going to lob stuff at us. Okay, we also have a second report from Lake, ISP Detective Lake. He's saying during November 16th and 2022 and January 7, 2023, he conducted telephone triage interviews with people associated to the victim and survivors of the quadruple murder in Moscow, Idaho. The triage telephone interview determined the extent of information the person possessed and if an in-person interview should be conducted. So it sounds like he was, if you're familiar with triage, right? And Whitcomb talks about here, what is urgent? What is urgent? He says the use of the battlefield term triage might seem a bit extreme until one considers the pressure law enforcement felt during the early weeks of their investigation. It would not be a stretch to liken the pressure to combat, the workload to trying to sip water from a fire hose. If I don't ever hear that again, I would be so happy. I hate that phrase. I don't know why. Somebody I know used to say that all the time. Okay, if I never hear that again. Okay. He says, with 4 dead co-eds, a gruesome crime scene, and international attention focused on a community that had never previously felt the need to lock their doors, it must have seemed daunting. Yeah, so why wouldn't you ask the feds in for the behavioral analysis? I don't know. Maybe they just made their group, their victimology group, and they wanted to. I mean, who knows? But triage, that's like, fielding. You've seen it in a busy ER. Which one needs, codes are ringing off the thing and whatever. He says dozens of law enforcement professionals from several agencies had been called into the investigation by the time Lake formed his team. The case file had grown to tens of thousands of pages. Things were running 24/7. He said, he spoke to a Kaylee Tavernier, however you pronounce it. Kaylee says she knows victim Ethan Chafin and others and was present at the Sigma Chi party with her best friend, Kylie Eppenstein. She believed Ethan wasn't acting like himself and keeping to himself. Kaylee later stated she may have mistaken the identity of the person she believed was Ethan. She provided via email a vague photo from the party. No evidentiary value was obtained in the video. The provided video is added to evidence data of this report. Okay, here he's going here. I don't know what he's going. So Whitcomb, the author, he says if this video exists, he couldn't find it in the massive disclosure to the defense. Now, remember, Whitcomb is reading defense files. He's not reading prosecution files. He's not reading the entire thing. So he says there's no emailed copy of the vague video from the party. It seems likely that Ann Taylor had not even heard about it because there's no mention in the formal supplemental discovery request as cataloged in 2 terabytes of files. So, where's he going with this? Well, one of the people was acting weird, potentially, which would be Ethan. Nunez said suicide. So it could have been a murder-suicide. Like, I'm trying to think where he's going with this, okay? Why other than saying items reported to be in discovery, state discovery, were not in the defense discovery? Like, why is this piece so important? He says, even more troublesome is the fact that neither Kylie Eppenstein nor anyone else has ever apparently been asked what might have been bothering Ethan. Bill Thompson's files contain documentation of a text sent from Erica to Ethan. There we go. I told you, like, he don't mention anything without a reason. Let me start over. Bill Thompson files contain documentation of a text sent from Erica to Ethan at 5:30 p.m. Friday saying, "You're getting cheated on," but there is no further context. Ethan received a second, nearly identical text from Erica at 12:43 Sunday morning, but no one seems to have determined what this meant in terms of his relationship with Zaina. The fact that Ethan was murdered naked in his girlfriend's bed only complicates Joe Lake's mission to figure out why. So he's saying this wasn't followed up? Like, I don't know. That could be if it was a murder, suicide, spree, kill your friends kind of thing. Maybe. I don't know. So he says, and while we're focusing on victimology, it feels prudent, he's going somewhere, to reach beyond Officer Lake's one-paragraph memorial. I guess that's the triage statement. To look deeper into the only male life stolen that morning. Okay, here's where he's going. As Judge Hippler stated at the change of plea hearing, he was a human being who should be remembered as such. Ethan Chapin was a vital, accomplished son and brother, cut down in the prime of his life by a vicious assassin. He deserves more than a brief mention in a mysterious text from someone named Erica. So, is Whitcomb saying, because we've heard a lot about the girls, is he saying that the victimology wasn't focused on Ethan at all? That it was just the girls? I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting, right? Because the book is not a memorial book, right? I'm just trying to understand where we think he's going to go here. So he talks about Ethan here, who was 20 years of age. He was a freshman, 6'4", 228 pounds, from Conway, Washington, majoring in recreation, sport, and tourism management. Interesting. That sounds like a fun profession. Like, I don't know what exactly that job comes to, but that's interesting. He was a member of Sigma Chi, lived by himself in an off-campus apartment, and drove a red Jeep registered to his father. According to friends in a published obituary, he laughed continuously. He smiled when he woke up and was still smiling when he went to bed. He was kind to all and a friend to all. Ugh, sounds like a great guy. Then Whitcomb talks about that Officer Joe Lake interviewed James Chapin, who he referred to as the loving father of his triplets, Ethan, Hunter, and Maisie. So Ethan was a triplet. Is that how you say it? A triplet? One of a triplets? One of a set of triplets? I don't know what the singular of a triplet is. Any triplets out there know? He says Lake reported that Ethan was a leader who had great relationship with his girlfriend of almost a year, Zaina, and he was the first delivered of the triplets, all whom attended the University of Idaho. That must be horrible. That must be horrible to be there and have to be there, because I don't think you can just, I guess you could quit your college in midstream. That's got to be bad. They talk about Ethan was very close to his brother and sister, and to Peter Elgaraga, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, was his closest friend. At the time, police started handing out background questionnaires to friends, family members, and acquaintances. So the dad said, we're not aware of anything that could have sparked this, meaning Ethan was the focus, or somebody had a grudge with Ethan. Now, Peter, the best friend, agreed with Ethan's dad that he was Ethan's best friend. In a December 5th interview, he told Officer Lake he was also a member of the Sigma Chi fraternity where he lived in apartment 5. He said he once had a romantic relationship with Zaina. Lake wrote, El Griaga, I don't know how to pronounce that, stated Kernodle had a lot of admirers, but she and Chapin were perfect for each other. The night before the murders, Chapin told El Griaga, it can be difficult to be in a relationship with Kernodle because she draws so much attention. Now, Whitcomb says, Lake learned more on December 1st when he interviewed Ethan's fraternal triplet, Hunter. Both Ethan and Kernodle were well liked by others and the life of the party. They regularly had parties at 1122 King Road, but it was generally the same 20 up to 70 people who frequented the parties and were all associated with the University of Idaho Greek life. On December 1st, also, Ethan's sister Maisie told Detective Danny Vargas that other than Zaina, her brother spent most time with El Garaga, Hunter Johnson, we've heard about him, a student named Kylie Frey, and Emily Allant. Okay, we've heard Emily's name too. Vargas reported Maisie, the sister, said she met Zaina once during sorority rush, but had gotten to know her through Ethan, and that the two had been dating for about a year. She said Ethan often spent time at the Mad Greek where Zaina worked, but the two never mentioned having weird feelings about anybody, customers or employees. Maisie went on to say Ethan didn't use drugs, but drank a lot, which was normal for fraternity life. Yes, it is. She said he never got into fights and never revealed any negative interactions with anybody at all, including Zaina's housemates. This talks about the timeline. Let me put that in. I'm assuming this is the night in question. Maisie said in the evening, Ethan went with her to her formal event, which was at Hunga Dunga from 1900 to 2000 hours. That's 7 to 8. Lake wrote, noting that this was a private event hosted by her sorority. She texted Ethan at approximately 8:14 hours, telling him she did not want to go with them to Sigma Chi and was going to stay at her sorority. Maisie said that Ethan texted her several times trying to convince her to come to Sigma Chi, but she did not go and eventually fell asleep around 2200 hours, which is 10 o'clock. Now, they talk about talking to a student named Tim DeWolf and some text conversations, but they say that it's reported here that Detective Brady Walker, DeWolf denied that DeWolf had been in the same fraternity as Chapin for a year and a half and described Chapin as one of his best friends. And he says, Whitcomb says he's bringing this up because they the police found it difficult to pin down the movements of Ethan and Zaina late Saturday night into Sunday morning. And that would be important because did somebody follow them back? Did they, piss somebody off? Like rage? What, road rage? I mean, who knows, right? He says, though Chapin spent a good deal of time at the Sigma Chi fraternity house, he was not permitted to live there due to low grades. So no one paid much attention when he left. They also talk about a police search of his cell phone that he had been blocked by a woman named Dylan Sturrock and by another named Lydia Varga. He says, to date, it appears that no one in law enforcement has definitively identified or interviewed either women. So there is no way to tell if these blocked contacts have anything to do with his mood Saturday night or the cheating text from Erica. Now, he's saying that he can't verify this video of the person that was purportedly Ethan who is acting not normal, but they do have the text from the girl. But yeah, do you think that it would be important to talk to these blocked people to see if there had been any interaction? Because remember, we're hearing that Ethan gets along with everybody. He's always happy and he gets along with everybody. So they said they can't establish where he was last seen or what time he and Zaina returned to King Road. He says, this is Whitcomb, it remains a nagging void in the timeline. So this guy DeWolf, said that he was present with Chapin at Sigma Chi, but they don't have much contact. He said he did not text or have any other electronic communication with Chapin that night. They're looking for pictures or photos or text to establish the timeline. He did not know when Ethan left. So he said that Ethan had been dating Zaina for about 7 months and they stayed together about 6 nights a week. They talked about DeWolf, this is him talking about frequent parties at King Road, and that most were attended by 50 to 60 people. That's a lot. He knew Coronado well, but not The others, though he said they seemed to get along pretty well. Again, trying to figure out what was the problem that happened that night. They interviewed another guy, Jaden Shepard. Okay, why are these people important? We don't know. He was roommates with Ethan last year and was currently a roommate of Tim DeWolf. They attended the formal party and then went to the Sigma Chi party afterwards. He left around 1 a.m. and went to a party at the White's apartment building. I think we've heard that name before, accompanied by Trent Gwynn and Tim DeWolf. The apartment unit they went to was referred to as the Rack. They were at the White's until around 500 hours when they returned to their unit at Sigma Chi. So I don't know if they were sleeping over there or still partying or what. They went to bed around 5:30. He's had no contact with Chapin since the formal and did not have any contact with Kernodle that day. So I don't know why that's important. They tried to reach Gwyn, other fraternity brothers. I'm just going through this thing here. They got nothing. Kylie spoke to a lady named Kylie Pearson. She knew Kaylee as a previous neighbor. They weren't close. She didn't have a relationship with Madison or Bethany or Dylan. She recalled Ethan always being a funny guy, and Zaina was liked by everybody. Kylie had attended the Sigma party with a lady named Sophia and ran into both Ethan and Zaina. They were in good spirits. Blah, blah, blah. So I'm just looking at, like, he says, based on these reports and the rest of Lake's victimology, it seems clear that detectives considered Ethan an unfortunate bystander who was killed merely because he had gone home with Zaina. In order to study her and the other women in the house, however, we will have to reach beyond what Lake documented in these two brief reports. Though Ethan's life makes sense within the scope of a few pages, here we go, Maddie's and Kaylee's do not. We will return to them shortly. So Whitcomb talks about Bethany and that, trying to gather information on these kids, it's difficult, took a lot of time. What do you believe? And things of that nature. But he says, regardless of, and this is how he describes it, seeming contradictions in her accounts, her recollections of the 3 women and 1 man who died there hold singular importance. She memorialized them in a victim witness statement at Kohberger's sentencing hearing on July 23rd, 2025. And he's got them verbatim here, but let me just see if I can summarize this. She says she lost some of her best friends, but she lost a sister. She said she never in a million years would have thought that this would have happened. She thought that we were going to wake up and go upstairs and tell them how they had scared us, and they were going to tease us about how we're constantly scaredy cats and make jokes as we would go to Taco Bell like always. But that's not what happened. She says, and this is what's read in court, okay? I woke up around 7 with a terrible toothache, so I called my dad, who was a dentist, and asked what I should do. He told me to take Advil, so I did, and I went back to sleep. I was still out of it and didn't know what happened. If I had known, of course I would have called 911 right away. I still carry so much guilt for not knowing what happened and not calling right away, even though I understand it wouldn't have changed anything. Not even if the paramedics had been right outside the door. That has to be terrible. She says she was so frantic and scared to death, not knowing what happened. When she called 911, she couldn't even get the words out. And then she doesn't remember a thing. And that's common. She says it's like her brain wiped out the whole memory. It's traumatic. It's trauma. She said it was the worst day of my life and it will be. I mean, imagine seeing that. I mean, the cop was pretty, oh my God, right? She said she was trying to process the fact that my friends were truly gone and she had been attacked by the public. She was grieving, numb, and unsure what happened and what was even real, and at the same time was flooded with death threats. and hateful messages. She said social media made it so much worse, and strangers made up stories to entertain themselves. The media harassed not just her, but her family. People showed up at the house. They called her phone, all kinds of phones. And she says they were chased. That's terrible. She says she hates that they are gone. And she says for some reason she's here. She thinks about that every day. Why did I get to live and not them? She continues to go on about being scared. Is somebody going to come for her? She slept in her parents' room for almost a year. Double lock every door, set every alarm. I mean, yeah, right? She says she has not slept through a single night since this happened. She says for a long time she barely got out of bed. One day she realized she has to live for them. So she says she has to live for them in everything that she does. She's scared to be out in public. She says the house was not just a house, it was a home. We laughed until we couldn't breathe, made meals, did crafts, binge-watched reality shows, played games, and spent lazy days on the couch. Movie nights, wine nights, morning debriefs, pranks, hot chocolates, cookies, and warmth. She wants to talk about who they were. She said Halloween was one of her favorite memories, and they all went to Sigma Chi. But instead of partying, they sat in an apartment talking and laughing all night long. She said we didn't care about the party, we were just happy to be with each other. And that's important. There was a post, I don't know, Elon Musk forwarded around what somebody said, or vice versa, about AI and everything that technology and social media has taken from us. And I just did the video, if you see the video on this case, what I believe happened, I'm going to leave that at there, about Brian Kohberger being a stranger. It's so important to be with people and recognize people and support people and the value of people. She says Zaina was 1 in a million. She was life of the party, but she was the kindest and funniest person she knew. She made everyone feel so loved. She was just someone you always wanted to be around, no matter the circumstance. She talks about lighting up the room with just her presence. She says Kaylee had the most beautiful, radiant smile. She was so kind, but also one of the funniest people I've ever met. She loved playing pranks. She always had us laughing so hard we couldn't breathe. She was so full of energy and life. I believe she could have ruled the world if she wanted to, and she would have been America's sweetheart. Ethan, sweetest, most genuine guy, always smiling, making other people smile too. He was the kind of person you wanted around, so kind and easy to talk to, just so fun, and the way he cared for Zaina was truly something to admire, and proof that storybook love and true romances do exist. She says it was not only obvious to her, but to everyone that they were absolute soulmates. She talks about Maddie, and I think it's important here. This is not the story per se, the broken Plea story, but this is the human story, and we have to talk about them because we have been talking about them in the most horrific of ways. So I think we have to talk about them. She says Maddie was not only one of my best friends, but she was the older sister I would have always wanted. There was no one I looked up to or admired more. A ray of sunshine, everyone was drawn to her. She was kind, loving, fun, and passionate. She had the sweetest soul and wanted nothing but the best for everyone. She took her under her wing and made her feel safe and included, and above all, loved and valued. She never failed to make her laugh or put a smile on her face. She said to this day she's beyond grateful that she chose her to be her sorority little, which is a little sister. And she thanks God every day that she not only got to know her, but had her as one of her best friends. She says she can't pinpoint one favorite memory with Maddie because she has so many. And this would be a very long read if she did. She talked about making dinner binge watching Jersey Shore or Summer House, a dance routine, late night walks home from going out, shopping trips. She said she's beyond blessed that she had the chance to know every one of them. They changed her life in ways I would never put into words. And I believe that's what we're here for. We're here to help people. We're here to impact people. We're here to change people. And while I love technology, we can't remove that. She says she wishes more than anything she could hug them one last time and tell them how much she loves them. So she says she will keep living for them as long as she is lucky enough to be there. So, right? We get a little different insight into it. It's got to suck. I can imagine what the parents are going to say. Like, it's horrible. And we have to, even though they are part of this and they are critical parts of this, we have to remember the victim's story too. It's not just Brian's story. It's not the prosecutor's story or the defense story or Whitcomb's story. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have to remember them too. Whitcomb, the author, wants us to know that, or he feels, he's written here, that Detective Lake's victimology barely even mentions Zaina. He says, I didn't know that she was from Avondale. I didn't know that. That she was 20 years old the day she died. University of Idaho marketing major from Avondale, Arizona. I don't think we read that. I think we heard somewhere else. Who had moved to the small town of Post Falls, Idaho. Okay, where she played volleyball and soccer in high school. Okay. She was a member of Pi Beta Phi sorority, worked at the Mad Greek. And she says here what is less known, or he says here what's less known about Zaina is that she overcame significant adversity on her way to finding success at college. Zaina's parents were divorced, and her mother had suffered serious legal problems as a result of alleged substance abuse, as reported in police files. In fact, Kara Cornodle was incarcerated the night her daughter was killed. Oh. It talks about here, he's showing some stuff from the police department about her having a warrant for drugs. And, interesting, could the drugs be involved? And it says, though not mentioned in this report, it would later be revealed that Ann Taylor's office had represented Kara Cornodle as a public defender. Okay, so that's potentially the conflict that they talked about. So, he's talking about how they notified her and that, how they broke it down to her, and that obviously she was upset and she didn't have any idea who would want to hurt her daughter. And she stated that her husband specifically asked if, I'm assuming the mother had any involvement with the cartels, and her mother's exposure to organized crime. It says Kara has never been implicated in any way in her daughter's death. Talking about interviewing the dad. He lives in Arizona, apparently. And he would talk to them frequently, fly them home to Arizona at every opportunity. He bought a vehicle for her, paid her insurance. And he was asking about the report that the women had come home and found the front door to the house wide open. And Cornodle, the father, who they say is a construction contractor, told Lake that the front was barely hanging on the hinges, so he fixed it using longer screws. When asking about victimology, Zaina's dad told him Zaina was a state champion gymnast who wasn't scared of anything. He said Zaina and Ethan had a healthy, sustained relationship, and she was not the type that would lead anyone on that might be going to that text message cheating thing or whatever that was. And that he said that she, quote, handles advances with class. And let's see. I don't know why he's bringing this up about follow-up interviews with Kara Kernodle, and the conflict of interest. Okay, and we're asking here. So he's saying, why add Zaina's mom to the victimology if she was in jail at the time of the murders and had only limited contact with her estranged daughter? Yeah, why? I mean, well, I think you have to talk to everybody. He says, we must turn to MPD Corporal Brett Payne's November 13th interview of Emily Allant to gain insight. So Emily, she's asked, what's your relationship? And she says, Zaina was my best friend. She sounds poised, though distraught. She says, Ethan is her boyfriend, who's also one of my best friends. And Maddie, Mogan, and Kaylee are great friends to all of us, too, because they live with them. He asked about sorority, like Greek affiliation, and she said that she and Zaina were not anymore. Though she did not volunteer details at the time, it was widely known that Emily was Dylan Mortenson's big at Pi Beta Phi. Phi Beta Pi. Their relationship within the sorority at least partially explains Dylan's call Sunday morning, the day she called her. And they asked about Ethan's fraternity, and then he says the fact that she got it wrong underscores the problems in building a victimology. Direct witness testimony is notoriously unreliable. We talked about that. Hearsay is just about worthless. So I don't know what that chapter is there for, except it helps us realize the impact that these were really good people. I mean, I think they were people that had lives, right? I mean, I don't want to say I think, but it seems like he might have been, questioning. Like, there's so much stuff flying around. And we have to go back to, these are humans. Whatever mistakes they might have made at the night, or they didn't call, or the drinking, or all this stuff, it's just so horrible. All these people and the ripple effect of everything that happened. And that these were real people. And I don't know if their victimology, we didn't get anything from that. Right? We didn't get anything from that I'm aware of, unless you find something. I mean, things that should have been followed up on? Yes. I don't know. He doesn't seem like Whitcomb doesn't point to anything. So I don't know what to make of this chapter. But we'll move on to the next one. And I'm at least glad that we got to hear about them, because those are lives, no matter what, that were cut down. And it helps us get back to moving from the clinical sense of this to the human part of it, right?